afternoon, and welcome to Chicago Public Library. I'm Jennifer Lezak with the Cultural, Civic, and Literary Engagement team in the Adult Services Department. And on behalf of everyone at Chicago Public Library, welcome. Before we begin, we ask that you please silence your cell phones. Books are available for purchase in the lobby, and the author will sign books at the conclusion of the program, also in the lobby. Today's event is being live streamed on CPL's YouTube and Facebook channels and will be available for on-demand viewing immediately following the event. After the conversation, our guests will take questions from the audience for those who line up at the microphone in front of the stage. Virtual viewers, please put your questions in the chat. This afternoon, it is my pleasure to welcome Pascuala Herrera, the inaugural winner of the 2021 De la Página de la Fama contest. Pascuala will also share how and why she decided to self-publish and enter the contest. Chicago Public Library has been honored to be a longtime partner with the soon-to-be-famous Illinois Author Project and to support their important work in inspiring, uplifting, and supporting local authors here in Illinois. Our congratulations to Pascuala on being the first to achieve this new award. To start us off today, it is our pleasure to welcome Lucy Tarabor to share a little bit more about the soon-to-be-famous Illinois Author Projects. And also, please join me in welcoming Sarah, Lucy, and Pascuala to our stage.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. Great to be here with you all. As Jennifer said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of the contest before we get into talking to a couple of our winners here. This project has been around since 2013. That's when the seed was planted. And that is when, as you'll recall, ebooks suddenly became very popular, and it also became very, very easy and affordable to self-publish an ebook. And they became super popular, these self-published books. They have consistently been a high percentage of the Amazon best-selling ebooks. So folks are out there buying these books, but libraries at that point were still trying to figure out how to sort of take advantage of this treasure trove of new literature out there and figure out which were the best ones to offer to their patrons. And there was still a little bit of a kind of a stigma about self-published books as well. I had one brief conversation with a librarian in Lafayette, Indiana around this time. And I asked her about their self-published book collection. I said, do you have many? How do you handle that? And she said, well, we're not allowed to purchase self-published books, but we are getting interlibrary loan requests for them. So if that's not a demonstration of how the patrons are ahead of the libraries, I don't know. So anyway, in an effort to catch up, there was a group of library marketing professionals that attended the American Library Association conference in 2013 and heard a talk by Dr. David Vinjamori, who is an NYU professor and a branding expert. And he pointed out to the group of librarians there that libraries and librarians are among the most trusted institutions and individuals in America. And with all that trust comes power that we weren't really using. And he sort of threw down the gauntlet to the librarians present and said, you can go out there, you can find an unknown author, and you can bring them to prominence, basically to make them famous. And this small group from Illinois decided to take on that challenge. And that's how the soon-to-be-famous Illinois Author Project was born. And we gave out our first award. That was 2013, and got it together and gave our first award in 2014. So this is our 9th year. And it's really exciting to be a part and read so many really wonderful self-published books and being able to put them into the hands of our patrons. Since then, lots of things have changed and grown. Probably most importantly is that our project has become a model for other states and even a couple of Canadian provinces to start their own indie author book contests. There are currently 18 states, I believe, and 2 Canadian provinces who are involved in this. And they all operate under the umbrella of the Indie Author Project, which encompasses all of these regional contests. And once a year, the winners of each of the state and regional contests have an opportunity to compete for Indie Author of the Year. So it's really become quite a big thing. International, we like to say. Other things that have changed over the years, we added young adult fiction to the genres that we would consider for the prize. We started an unpublished manuscript prize a couple of years ago to try to work with authors that were a little bit earlier in their journey, not yet published, and instead of prize money, what the winner of those contests receive is free line editing and cover design and some promotion from us as well. So that was an exciting new step for us. And this year, as Jennifer mentioned, we are super excited to have launched the De la Página a la Fama, which is the Spanish language component of our project. And we are deeply grateful for a group of librarians that came on board, bilingual librarians who helped us to recruit Spanish-speaking judges and market this and supported this project all the way through. We could not have done it without you. And we're thrilled to have Pascuala Herrera here as our inaugural winner. Before we get to that, though, I want to make a couple of points. One is that the project, the contest, is still open for self-published books, both English and Spanish. It is open until June 30th. I know that's not a lot of time, but if you happen to have a self-published book out there, it's not too late to enter it. And you can go to soontoBeFamous.info, our website, for all the information and the entry portals and everything that you would need to know. So June 30th, you've got until then. The other thing I want to expand on a little bit, I mentioned the manuscript contest. We recently closed the manuscript contest for this year, and I'm really excited to announce our winner for this year, and it is Sarah Roots, who's sitting here to my left. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being able to come down here and talk with us for a minute. You just want to tell us a little bit about and I didn't mention your manuscript is called House Call. And we'd love it if you could just say a little bit about that and maybe how you decided to enter it into the contest.
Sure. So my manuscript is a mystery novel featuring a nurse named Meg who moves back to her small hometown in Wisconsin. And one day while she's out visiting patients, she discovers the dead body of a young woman. And the police and everyone think it's an overdose, but Meg thinks there are some suspicious circumstances, so she starts investigating further, and it goes from there. And I first found out about the contest back, I think in 2017. I was doing a writers group up at Edgewater branch of the Chicago Public Library, and the librarian there mentioned the contest. So I had it in the back of my head for years. If I ever finished a book, I was going to enter it. And then I finally finished a book, but hadn't figured out exactly how to publish it or what I wanted to do with it. And I saw the manuscript contest, so I was very excited to enter it there and very honored to have won and to be here today.
Well, thank you, and congratulations again. And shout out to Chicago Public Library for supporting we've gotten a lot of entries from Chicago Public, and we're really excited about that. And thank you also for hosting us today for this. So thanks a lot, Sarah. All right, now on to the main event. Oh, wait a minute. I think there was one more thing I forgot to mention, and that is if you're entering the contest this year, the prize money has doubled. That's an important thing that I shouldn't have forgotten to mention. So each winner in both in the Spanish language and English language category will receive $2,000 in prize money. It was previously won. So we're doubling that, and because of the generosity of Lectorum, which is a digital library of selected Spanish language books for schools and libraries, we're also able to offer a $500 prize for the runner-up in De la Página a la Fama. So we got extra incentive for you all to enter the contest. All right. Well, again, Pascuala, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course, thank you.
And congratulations on being the inaugural winner of this prize. I've had a chance to chat with you before, and it's a very inspiring, fascinating story that Pascuala has to tell. And we'll talk a little bit, I want to get into a little bit of your story. First of all, the name of it is Not Always a Valley of Tears, and I'm going to try to say it in Spanish, and you correct me if I'm wrong. No siempre es un valle de lágrimas.
Yay.
And it is available in both English and Spanish. And that title kind of caught my attention because I know in the book you mentioned that your mother's philosophy was that life was a valley of tears. Tell us how you came to title your book Not Always a Valley of Tears.
Well, first, it was a recommendation from my daughter that I even write as a way to give my mom, who had passed away in 2018, a tribute for all that she did for me. And so originally when I first hit the keyboard, I thought my title was going to be Life is a Valley of Tears. And as I wrote, and I cried in pieces, but I also remembered so many happy moments. I often felt sad about what I had experienced, but then I also felt joy. And so when I finished the first draft, I wasn't happy with naming it Life is a Valley of Tears, because although I've had a difficult life because of contracting polio as an infant and living in a big family, low income, and not having the medical care and crawling around, and going through all the medical procedures that to try to get me to walk, along with a lot of broken bones. You know, I understand why my mom saw it as a valley of tears, and she used that to encourage me to move forward, because if I focused on what was going on with me, I would give up, and she didn't want me to do that. So I totally understand why she used that, because she would say, life is a valley of tears, but, you know, we're going to go to a better place. My mom was very faithful. She was raised Catholic, and so she used that. And then, however, I've had such a marvelous life, even with all those struggles. I got an education. I had a wonderful career working as a faculty member at Harper College. I got married and have 2 beautiful daughters. How can I say that life is a valley of tears when there's so much joy in my life?
Very inspiring. You mentioned that when you were an infant, you were diagnosed with polio. What was that like for you and your family? You touched on it, but how did that affect you and your family?
What I realized is that I suppressed the hardships, and I remember the joy of being a child. I remember some of the, and you know, when you're 5, 6 years old, you think, has this really happened, or did I just imagine that? But thankfully, my mom shares so many stories with me, along with my 8 siblings who are older than I am. They had a lot more information to help me write the first chapters of my book. But what I do remember is being a happy child. There was no labeling of my disability. I was just one of the 9 children my mom had. And the neighbors, because we lived in a town, un rancho, you know, with about 250 people, and no running water, no electricity, and they would come out and enjoy my enthusiasm as a child and my happiness. So they try to help too, by building with a piece of plank wood, a little cart so I could be pulled around, because I was crawling pretty much on the streets, along with, you know, the pigs and other animals, livestock that walked around the paths, and playing with beetles. And I remember all that, but I don't remember it as, oh, poor child. You know, I remembered it as I was living a fun life. And after writing the book, some of the people who observed me as a child, they've contacted me, and you know, they really touch my heart when they say how incredible it is to be where I am today compared to then.
So you grew up in Mexico.
Yes.
And then you say in the book when in 1971 you were just 6 years old and you emigrated to the U.S. What do you remember about that experience?
Well, as most immigrant families, I think, there's first the culture shock, knowing a new language, new foods, new way of doing things. But on top of that, I received the label of disability. This is prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was signed into law in 1990, that allowed more integration of individuals with disabilities, in society. Because it was the 70s, I was told I couldn't go to the school, my neighborhood school, and I had to be bused away to a special school. So it was very difficult for me as a child to comprehend why I couldn't go with my brothers and sisters. In addition, I didn't quite understand what was the whole fuss about wanting me to walk. I had never walked, so it didn't make sense to me. I even felt like they were hiding that I was really sick, and that's why I had to keep going to the hospital. But it was the goal of, getting me to walk, which is what is considered normal. And it is something that my mom really aspired to do, especially because when I contracted polio and was totally paralyzed, everyone told her I was going to die. And she prayed and prayed, and just hoped that one day I would be standing on my own 2 feet. And so as a child, I loved this country and the newness. Even though often we were labeled as low income, I couldn't understand that either because, heck, we never had running water, and now we have a sink, now we have a fridge, now we have, all these appliances that we didn't have in Mexico. How can our family be low income when we felt so rich? It was like going from rags to rich, So those are my experiences and what I remembered. So it was a difficult childhood. I had to learn very quickly to think like an adult, whereas other children were safeguarded from the things that can happen. I was right away having to face all of these obstacles.
And what about learning English? I assume that when that was your first experience having to pick up a new language, is that right?
Oh, yes, yes. In Mexico, my family attempted for me to go to the school, which was about a mile away. My sister carried me for a whole week on her back, thinking that she could manage that, but we concluded it wasn't possible. And so I had no education at all as a child in Mexico, and it wasn't until I came to this country that I was put into special education classes. And I was all by myself. No one spoke my language. No one appeared to be eating my kind of food. The individuals, my classmates, all looked very different because it was different types of disabilities. So learning English became even a bigger decision for me because I needed to survive in this environment and I needed to communicate. Furthermore, my mom would be going to the hospitals, and although we had a friend that would come with us to doctor's visits because my mom didn't speak English, I soon had to take on that role and become an interpreter. And so I hyper-focused, particularly in the language and in writing. And interestingly, as a third grader, they said, someday you're going to be a great author. And of course, I just brushed it off like, that's what you tell a child. But it definitely did encourage me, and I love the English language.
Interesting. You also mentioned earlier about how you were growing up before the Americans with Disabilities Act and how different things were back then. And I understand that you got involved in activism and the disability movement, and I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about that.
Yes. When I went to college at DePaul University, I really had this urge of making things different because even at DePaul, I encountered obstacles all the time because of my disability. There were buildings I couldn't enter. There were things I couldn't do. And so in my mind, I wanted to change that. And I became aware of an organization called ADAPT, which is a national organization of people with disabilities across the nation that gather together to advocate for change. This group made the ADA possible because it was through activism that President Bush finally signed the law in meeting the demands that the nation of people with disabilities were clamoring. And I went to different cities. It would be hundreds, 500 wheelchairs blocking major intersections, sometimes chaining our wheelchairs so that the police couldn't pull us away too easily. And really all we wanted was media attention. It was peaceful demonstration, but we wanted to, get the media attention, and blocking streets with people with disabilities did that. And so often there were some arrests, and so I really was a little intimidated by that, especially because I was about to graduate from DePaul and start a new job at Harper College. And so anyway, I really believe that I was feeling like a hypocrite, because if I really believed in the cause, why should I be afraid of getting arrested when other individuals with disabilities, more severe than mine, that couldn't go out to the bathroom on their own, take their own medication, and they needed assistance for everything, they were willing to get arrested? Why should I be afraid when I can take care of myself? And then, one added benefit of being an activist was that one day this man was next to me in his wheelchair, and we're chanting for the rights of people with disabilities. This was Las Vegas, and people do not want to be stopped from gambling, that's for sure. And so this young man says, "You want to get arrested today?" And I'm like, what a pickup line. Well, little did I know that that was going to be our first encounter of a lifetime together, because I ended up marrying Isidro, who we will be celebrating 27 years of marriage in July 1st. He was from Texas, and he had a disability too, and he had the same want of making our country better, not only for ourselves, but for so many people with disabilities. After all, there's almost 20% of the U.S. population has one form of disability or another. So we felt that this was an important. And so I think our similar goals united. Plus, he was a Herrera, and I wouldn't have to change my name. That was another plus.
I didn't know that. Same last name.
Yeah, so sometimes I would say I'm Pascuala Herrera squared. But then I'm like, no, they might think I'm talking about my weight. I better not use that. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's a great first date story to tell your children. In another interview that I heard that you did, you said that you became an author by a miracle. Can you tell us a little bit about what you meant by that?
So, as I mentioned, I had been working at Harper for 30 years. I was eligible for retirement, but I've always been a a hard worker, and I was really scared about retiring, but I also knew that it was time. You kind of feel that sense. First, I was commuting way too far, and with the weather, it was just getting to be bothersome for me. And so I decided to retire, and I thought, oh, I'll take a few months, and then I'll figure what I want to do. Well, then the world fell apart, and we went on the pandemic. So it wasn't like I could enjoy even my retirement. I couldn't go out to eat with friends or travel or anything. So I was feeling a little depressed after having cooked every recipe my mom ever taught me. I just am not made for the full-time kitchen. I just am not. I tried every recipe, and although they like what I cook, it wasn't like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so my daughter noticed that I was feeling pretty down, about my decision of retiring, and also about I had never really taken the time to grieve the loss of my mom. So she suggested, why don't you write as a tribute to Grandma? But at this time, it wasn't even so you can publish it and become a soon-to-be famous author. It was just write your story. You've always told me so many interesting parts of your life that it would be great for you to have a writing about it. And so, not kidding, my almost 300-page took me 3 weeks to write. The ideas just came by. And as I mentioned earlier, some of them I would be like sobbing because I had learned to suppress the pain, to move forward. And now that I had to write it, it came all back alive. And amazingly, I did have a lot of memories that I didn't even know I had. And they just would come. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I'd think of another story. Oh, I got to put this one in too. And so my husband was like, oh, you up again? Because I would light up and crank up my laptop. But it took me 3 weeks to write the book. And at this time, I'm still thinking it's a book for the family because it's a really good representation of what our family endured, obviously with the focus of my disability, but, our immigration to this country and the struggles we had and how we lived our family life. So I shared it with siblings and a few of my nieces and, of course, my 2 daughters and my husband. And they said, this needs to go to the public. And so I see that as a miracle because at this point, I even felt, vulnerable because I was sharing, I'm like, who's going to want to read all my sob stories? And it was through their encouragement, they said, why don't you publish this? It needs to be out there because at least we were in the middle of the pandemic. They need positive stories of survival and success, and it would be really good if you published it. And by the way, it's not because you need the income. You're retired. You have your pension. So do it just because of your help for others. And so I sent it out in the beginning to traditional route of publishing. And all the replies, if I got any, was, sorry, we're not taking any work because of the pandemic. I'm not a patient person, so I was getting very discouraged. I'm like, I go, well, maybe I can just self-publish it for our family. And so my daughters helped me during a winter break, and we figured all the, requirements of getting ISBN numbers and, copywriting and finding a book design, a cover designer and an editor. So I went through all that, and I found it not to be even that expensive of what I thought it was going to be. And so it got published in March of 2021 when I had started writing it in September. So the turnaround time is pretty incredible, I think, as far as when I talk to other authors and the process they go through. And so again, I was feeling a little intimidated about how are people going to say, because I was very honest about how people interact with me as a person with a disability and how microaggressions happen without people thinking they're complimenting me when they really are making me feel bad. And I always wondered, will they know I'm talking about them? You know, but I had to be honest. I had to speak honestly from my experience and from being married to an individual with a disability and how we were viewed as a family. And so then I decide, well, I need to do some marketing. And so I got a list of all the Illinois libraries, which I was shocked that there are over 600. I had no clue about that. And I just drafted a quick email and telling them, you know, you might want to have this book at your library. And one of the librarians from Gail Borden reached out to me and said, you know, we have this wonderful contest that you might want to enter, and we have a Spanish category. And so I did, again, not knowing really what I was doing, knowing what, you know, would happen. I just did. In fact, I entered the same book twice to the same contest because two people told me about it, and I didn't realize it was the same contest. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but but anyway, I was so thrilled to find that I won, and it has opened up opportunities that I never imagined. It's a wonderful ride that I'm taking. I could have never imagined. And in a way, I feel that it was a miracle because through this, I've discovered a second career in which I can continue influencing people and making them be more accepting of people who are different and being more aware of people's struggles instead of making assumptions about them.
You had talked about how one of the things you'd been doing during the writing of it that kind of came out was kind of suppressing the pain that you were feeling about losing your mom.
Yes.
Do you feel that now that you have completely told the story that
it was so therapeutic
that?
For me. It was so therapeutic, this book. So I even admitted that even if not one book was sold, that it was well worth it because of my experience in writing it and what I worked out about myself. For so long, I viewed my disability as something to hide, something negative about me. And through the process of writing, I discovered that it is as much part of my identity as being Latina from Mexico, that my disability is part of who I am. I also was able to really work out a lot of the feelings I had about my mom's death. I knew my mom had dedicated her life to me, and all her children too, but particularly to me. And so when she passed away, I had this sense of guilt because I felt all I did was make her suffer. And I missed her so much, and I needed her so much. And I just felt this guilt. And again, you know, I just pushed forward, continued working, continuing doing what I did without taking the time to really reflect. And after writing the book, I concluded that, yes, I made her life difficult, but I also brought her a lot of joy in seeing what is possible when there's hard work, dedication, and effort. And so, in a way, I let go of the guilt, and now I also got resignation and acceptance that she is in a better place and that she left right when I really didn't need her physically. I always will need her in other ways. But I had my own family, I had my children, and had my life set. And so I think that it was time for her to go, and I was able to accept that. And one way after I wrote the book, I concluded that one way to always have her with me was to make it possible for me to have a garden, because my mom was an avid lover of gardening. That was her only hobby aside from the kids and grandchildren and everybody that she cared for. And I lived next door to her, and so she had the most beautiful garden, and she did my garden too. And after writing the book, I acknowledged that I took it for granted, and now it looks so dark. The plants were all wilted, because I couldn't take them out, or I couldn't do much because of my physical limitations. So I decided that to finish the tribute to my mom, I would have my yard modified so that it could be accessible. So I had raised beds put throughout, and you should see my garden now. And even though I thought I never had a green thumb, they're surviving even this heat. So kudos to me. And, I feel close to my mom, too. And by the way, I use the yard, too, for inspiration for further writing.
Yeah, well, and we're going to go there in a minute, but that's fantastic that you created that garden in your mom's honor, and what a beautiful tribute, both the book and
sometimes I'm like, oh, Mom is probably laughing at me because I even talked to the plants when I used to tease her all the time when she did, and now I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, Mom, what have you turned me into?
I've heard that helps them. They like that.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned to me just a few minutes before we started that you have been doing workshops, writing workshops, encouraging others to tell their stories.
Oh, yeah.
And I imagine you've probably encountered people in the same situation as you, where there's sadness and there is loss that they want to express through their writing.
Yeah, individuals themselves have contacted me. I'm working with an 84-year-old Colombian woman who has kept collections of poetry. And she read my book and knew that I told her that I self-published it. So I've been helping her and trying to organize all her poetry. So, she says that's her life goal, and that she's elderly and would like that. So I want to help her. Then I have a retired nurse woman from Argentina who lost her grandchild, kind of like you're saying, and she's felt a lot of pain, especially because she was a nurse and she couldn't help her. And so she already has a manuscript, so I'm helping her with the process of finding an editor, and luckily my editor is willing to help her. And then I've been doing a lot of presentations, and I did one at my local parent council organization, which is, they have them in a lot of cities, the BPAC organization. And I did just a presentation about my book. The whole club or the whole group read my book. And when I mentioned that I self-publish, the leader got the light bulb on and say, oh, we all have wonderful stories to share. Could you please, if we contract you, do some writing workshops for our group? So I've done 4, and now they're done writing their vignette, because they're like, you want us to write 300 pages? I'm like, no. It would be too long. There's 20 of you here. So if each of you write, 5 to 10 pages, that would make a good book. And you should see the incredible stories that individuals. I didn't want to give them a format because I think when you give an outline, that doesn't allow the creativity to come out. And so some people talk about their experience living in Argentina or Colombia or in Mexico. A woman wrote about her own struggles with for suicide because of how overwhelming it was for her to come to this country. And so I also obviously help them to realize that they don't have to share everything, you know, that they have to be first safe themselves, but that, you know, if it helps them and if they're willing to share it with the public, then go ahead and write it. And so anyway, summer is in session now, but starting fall, we'll go through the next steps of actually publishing it, the book.
So another career.
Yes. I all of a sudden became a self-publishing advocate.
And
I don't know.
That's, you know, that's exactly what we're trying to do in our project. So it's wonderful that
Yeah.
you're doing that. The last thing I want to ask you before we see if there's some questions from people watching, your garden. You also just mentioned that there's something that you're working on now, another book that's
Yeah.
related to garden, and I wondered if you'd talk about that a little bit.
Originally, my goal was to write during winter break, you know, because I try to stay put as much as possible during the winter. But I found out my daughter, who got married this January, is pregnant and is due in December. And I want to be playing with my grandchild, so I'm like, oh, I won't have time to write. So I better speed up the process and the timeline. So I started June 1st, and just like my memoir, I'm finished already. I'm just doing, I always like to go and move things around, you know, say things in a different way. So I do it twice. I read it twice. But I already have my same editor and my for both the Spanish and the English, and I already have my book design. They all are on board, you know, and happy to have it. So this is also going to be a nonfiction book. It's going to be a self-help book, and the garden inspired me in the title. I have the title. It's going to be Life is a Garden to Cultivate, and then subtitle will be The ABCs to a Better Life. And I'm going to be sharing, just not as a counselor or as a psychologist, but just as me, Pascuala, who struggles every day in life and who has worked with so many other people who have struggled. Just my opinions about how to live a better life. And I, full disclosure, say that I still struggle, because life is not like, okay, I'm done, I'm all that I can be, and I don't need any work on my life no more. No. And I do a lot of analogies just because I'm keeping a garden. You know, sometimes a plant is withering. Oh, maybe it's getting too much sun. Let me move it over here. Or another plant may be needing more water. I better water it twice a day. And so you do that for a garden, and it's never done, and it's never complete. There's always something to do. And what more can we do about our life? It's never done. We got to keep on working on it to make it better, to learn more, to think of ways to maybe stop self-judging ourselves. And, you know, again, full disclosure, doesn't mean that I don't do it and I'm superhuman and I got it all right. But I'm honest in this book, too, about just my reflection about the different topics. And I use the ABCs just as an organization of my ideas from A through Z.
I can't wait to read that. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to see now, do we have any questions from either the audience or online?
Yes, we have a couple of questions from the chat, and if you have questions to ask here, come down to the microphone. Someone asks, what advice do you have for other authors who are looking to follow the same path as you for self-publishing?
So definitely the first thing is to get rid of any trepidation or fear, because I don't know why, and I felt the same way. It seems like a daunting experience, like an unreachable, you know, goal, and it's very scary. So the first thing is to acknowledge that step by step, you could have a published book. definitely you need to be organized, and you need to find the right professionals. There's a lot of freelancers that are willing, ready, and able. You know, some, cost a little more, some less. So you just need to be patient to find the right fit for what you want to do. Because to self-publish, you want to have a quality book. You can't just like type it up and then just think you can publish it. You want to have the cover to attract, readers. You want to have the interior, kind of easy to flow and read. And so just take it step by step. And even the things that I thought, like, what? I can copyright my own book? Well, how is that possible? There's a process, and you just need to take that step by step, and it's doable. And I think you need to know that there might be an investment, that if you want a quality book, but the satisfaction and often even the royalties and other opportunities that come with it, it washes off any investment. So it's the best investment I've ever made.
Someone else asks, Pascuala, how do you keep yourself going writing when you are feeling discouraged?
Actually, that's when I feel more encouraged into writing, because I've always used writing as a way to get through tough times. I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but now that after writing my memoir, when I lost a son to premature birth, I wrote tons of poetry. I added a few in my memoir that I wrote. I always have journaled, and my journals are not like diaries, like today I woke up. No. It's things that are heavy on my mind, and I've written it. And so I use my sadness as a motivator to express what I am feeling, and then automatically I feel better, because I get it out.
Hola.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today. I had two questions. One of them is, maybe you already mentioned it. Did you write the book first in Spanish or in English?
No, I did write the English first. And actually for this book that I'm now writing, I tried to write it in Spanish first. It wasn't going to go fast. English, I never went to school in Spanish. I'm fully bilingual, but it's not my comfortable language. And so I did it first in English, and then I translated it myself, but then I hired an editor because I want to make sure all the accents were in the right place, and, the vocabulary. What is really, it was for me very interesting was that using, tools that are existent is a good start, but by no means is it foolproof. Words, as you probably, are you bilingual? Are, depending on where you're from, there's different vocabulary. And so I had to change a lot of it. In addition, I wanted it to address my little town in Mexico. That was the audience that I really wanted to capture. So even in words that possibly could have been said, more formal, like colegio. We say colegio, but any college is considered universidad. I left it as colegio because that's what my circle of influence calls it. And so you have to make those types of decisions.
And are you able to, does the little town have a little library or anything?
I'm the first author. So the whole town has clamored. I got cousins I didn't even know I had. They are thrilled. They support, by social media and participating in any event that they're available to. So they're really thrilled. They do not have a library, but that's because most of the people are in the United States, and they just go for the summer over there. It's very few people who are left, over there.
But I really do like how you advocated writing as therapy as a way to get your stories out. And did you discover that mostly with this memoir that it served that way, or before, like in your life?
Well, I had been using writing, but I didn't know that that's why I was doing it. It wasn't until I wrote the memoir that I realized I've always written. This is helpful. Why didn't I do this before? Had I known that self-publishing was not this grandiose, scary part, I would have written a long time ago. I just was too busy raising my kids and working that I never thought that publishing was even in my life, in my prospect for me.
And we have one final question from the audience. Pascuala, there are not many books like yours from the perspective of people with disabilities. Do you have other authors you read with disabilities who inspire you?
Yes, anytime I see the word, I call it the D word, disability, I grab my hands because I always learned from others. And I am not an expert on disabilities. I'm only an expert on my disability. And so I like to read different perspectives. And there are some people who have written, who I know of through my social activism, that I follow, Jenna Human and other, Human is her last name. I don't remember exactly. Judith Human, and people like that who have written books. I try to read it. And there's so much many articles, so I'm always reading about the D word.
What are some of your personal favorite authors and how did they inspire you?
My favorite authors really is not something that I have a favorite. I am open to whatever I put my hands on. I try not to just read from one author. I like to get a diverse perspective on things. Obviously, there's some people that I really enjoy, like Maya Angelou and, the Obamas, things like that I really enjoy. But I wouldn't say they're my favorites because I also read in Spanish, and there's some authors from there. So what inspires me most is honesty. And so I tend to really gravitate more to nonfiction than fiction. I don't know why. And so I guess I use literature for my own self-growth. And so I really look for honesty. I don't want to be told what I already know. I want to really be told from your point of view. Does that answer? Sorry, I don't have a specific.
That's all the questions we have, but I just want to remind our audience that Pascuala's books are available in English and Spanish at your Chicago Public Library. So please do go check them out, and I'll pass it back to you, Lucy.
Sure. Well, what a wonderful conversation that has been. Thank you so much, Pascuala, and thank you, Sarah, for joining us as well. Also, I want to mention, if you're not physically here, you can order Pascuala's books in English or Spanish at her website, which is pascualaherrera.com, correct?
They're available on Amazon, and Barnes & Noble and all the electronic bookstores.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for being with us. Your story is very inspiring, and I encourage everybody to read the book. Remember, authors out there, you have until June 30th to enter this contest. So
it's well worth it. You'll get a write of your life.
Right, and if you're not quite ready by then, there's another contest next year. So
can I just make one last comment?
Certainly.
And that my book is available now in audio in my voice. For the English, the Spanish book is in process, but will be available also in audio as an Audible on Amazon.
Terrific. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.